No, hear me, Daenerys Targaryen. The glass candles are burning. Soon comes the pale mare, and after her the others, Kraken and Dark Flame, Lion and Griffin, the Sun's Son and the Mummer's Dragon. Trust none of them. Remember the Undying. Beware the Perfumed Seneschal. What does this mean by Quaithe when she tells this to Daenerys? Who should she distrust? Who is this Perfumed Seneschal? Is it Illyrio, Varys, or Resnack? Or do you believe it is somebody else? And by the end of the video, hopefully we can determine who is this character that Daenerys needs to be aware of.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
All right, well, welcome back to the Grease Common YouTube channel. Today's video, like I mentioned in the intro, or I guess the pre-intro, we're going to be discussing the person that is prophesized by Quaithe as the Perfumed Seneschal. And this character, to me, I really do believe there's only about 3 options as of right now, just based on the description and how much of involvement they have with Daenerys' arc. When we see with like Quaithe's prophecy or thing she tells to Daenerys, the glass candles are burning, could be a reference into Marwyn, his plotline coming to see Daenerys. We have the Pale Mare, which is the plague that is going on during Dance and will be going on during Winds of Winter. And then she says after her the others, which possibly could also mean, you know, the White Walkers, but also could just be in reference to the other people that she references. So for instance, the Kraken being Victarion, the Dark Flame being Maquoro, the Lion being Tyrion, the Griffin being John Connington, the Sun's Son being Quentin, and the Mummer's Dragon more than likely being young Griff. But this idea of the beware of the Perfumed Seneschal comes very last. Remember the Undying. What does that mean? And so we're going to go through this a little bit. We're going to break down each candidate, and then by the end of it, I'm going to kind of give you who I truly believe is the person that will fulfill this kind of prophecy led by Quaithe. Now, I do want to also, because I myself, I think in the past, have not fully understood the definition of a seneschal, and what that actually means in terms of the story. So I want to give you guys an actual definition. Merriam-Webster, this is their definition when I looked it up. A seneschal is an agent or steward in charge of a lord's estate in feudal times. So you put that together also with the perfume aspect, and so any character that you're going to throw into this category has to fulfill both being a perfumed type of character with also this definition that we do have. So I want to start off with Resnack, because Resnack, when we go through the text, is the one that George basically gives us first. It's the first one Daenerys thinks of, and she instantly starts not trusting him because of this Quaithe prophecy. Let's look at some of the information that maybe points to Resnack. Resnack is a very prominent character within A Dance with Dragons, and this is his first description given by Daenerys. The seneschal wore a tokar of maroon silk with a golden fringe, a small, damp man. He smelled as if he had bathed in perfume and spoke a bastard form of High Valyrian, much corrupted and flavored with a thick Giscari growl. Now, this description actually comes before she gets this Quaithe prophecy, and so in this already, she already thinks that Resnack fits this on both sides. He is essential. It's basically what he's doing. He's kind of being like the steward or the person in charge of the household for Daenerys. And he is somebody that also, very similar to like a Varys or Illyrio character, smells very thickly. This isn't even the only time we get this description. Barristan later on will also note later on in his POV chapters that Resnack smells too fair. He smells too flowery. So right away, Resnack fits the description right away. But is this a little too on the nose, right? Because like I mentioned, when we get to, you know, Quaithe's prophecy, instantly, this is what Daenerys thinks. Resnack, why should I fear him? Dany rose from the pool, water trickled down her legs, and goose flesh covered her arms in the cool night air. If you have some warning for me, speak plainly. What do you want of me, Quaithe? And Quaithe just responds with, to show you the way. So right away, Resnack is the person Daenerys believes to be the person that she should fear or not trust. But importantly, Quaithe doesn't necessarily confirm or deny that. So that could be wrong, it could be right. We just don't know. But more specifically, he does tell Daenerys to remember the Undying and remember who you are. That's going to be very important, I think, the more we get into this video. So right away, Resnack, at least on a very basic level, fits the definition of what Quaithe is telling Daenerys. But let's even go further, because I think there's even more information in terms of Reznak's motivation, some of the actions he does, the counsel he gives Daenerys, that would also lean to somebody that she should not trust and could possibly be betraying her or be going openly against her. But not only that, we also see this, that the dragons seem to not trust Reznak, and also Reznak seems to fear them. As Reznak says, "In the pits, in chains, wailed Reznak Mo Reznak. What good are dragons that cannot be controlled? Even the unsullied go fearful when they must open the doors to feed them." And then he also responds a little bit later on. He says, "Pets," screeched Reznak. "Monsters, rather. Monsters that feed on children. We cannot," as he is silenced. So right away, you can tell that Reznak does not like the dragons whatsoever, which is interesting because it could be symbolism to him not liking Daenerys either. And if we even go back to one of his earliest mentions in A Dance with Dragons, we actually get this little part that says, "Her dragons were growing wild of late. Rhaegal had snapped at Eerie, and Viserion had set Reznak's toker ablaze the last time the Seneschal had called." So right away, we see that the dragons, yes, are growing more wild, but they take even more of an interest with Reznak. They seem to not trust him. And I want to kind of draw this parallel here. The dragons do, to a degree, understand Daenerys and won't hurt people that she doesn't want to be hurt, right? At least in proximity. Things like, for instance, her dragon killing a child, that's a bit different. But in terms of Reznak, Viserion lashes out, nearly killing Reznak. Is this similar to something like and how Grey Wind acts at the twins with Robb right before the Red Wedding? I think that's something that's very interesting. It seems to be this point of do not trust Reznak. But so that's one side of it, right? Reznak doesn't like the dragons don't like him. There's that weird, interesting relationship there. I talked about in last week's video this idea of how Brown Ben Plum actually has a good relationship with the dragons and actually seem to get along with them. It's interesting there that there is, some trust with the dragons, but here there is none. They want basically for him to die, more or less. But let's get into some of Reznak's policies as well, because Reznak is somebody that almost constantly goes against Daenerys. Daenerys is somebody that doesn't like the kind of the upper class, the nobles, and all of the slavers, right? But when you think about somebody like Reznak, he takes almost the complete opposite approach. He is somebody that almost constantly is on the nobles' side. Daenerys is trying to get more information concerning the Sons of the Harpy. The Shavepate, or Skahaz, and Reznak have two very different philosophies. The Shavepate says that, "But I say that blood must pay for blood. Take one man from each of the families I have named and kill him. The next time one of yours is slain, take two from each great house and kill them both. There will not be a third murder." Reznak squealed in distress. "No, gentle queen, much savagery would bring down the ire of the gods. We will find the murderers, I promise you, and when we do, they will prove to be base-born filth. You shall see." You see two very different philosophies, whereas, Shavepate is somebody that's much more for the lower class, the people that were in slavery. Reznak is on the opposite side of that. And so when we get more of those, information tidbits here, it's very interesting. Because it seems like the Sons of the Harpy have to be being paid by maybe the upper class, maybe Yunkai, the other slavers. But the fact that Reznak takes such a strong stance against the Shavepate is quite interesting given, Dany's belief system. It is very interesting. So let's move on to another point of this. One other part we get here in the story is that Reznak seems to defend the fighting pits being opened. He's very much on board with Hizdar from the very beginning that the fighting pits could be very beneficial to them. He says this when the subject is brought up. "Your Magnificence," whispered Reznak Mo Reznak in her ear, "it is customary for the city to claim 1/10 of all the profits from the fighting pits after expenses as a tax. That coin might be put to many noble uses." Again, he seems to very much be on Hizdar's belief system, but again, this is not the only time that we see things like that. Also, we see that he very much pushes in this same kind of interaction. He also pushes for Dany to take a noble husband. He has this to say on that as well. Reznak and the Green Grace have been urging Dany to take a Marinese noble for her husband, to reconcile the city to her rule. Hizdar Zolarak might be worth a careful look. Sooner him than Skahaz. So very interesting right away is that you already have you already have Resnack pushing for something with the Green Grace. Now, I'm not going to go into the Green Grace too much here because she's not too relevant to this video specifically, but I've done videos in the past talking about why I think the Green Grace is in charge of the Sons of the Harpy, or at least funding them and things like that. I would very much say that's worth the watch if you do enjoy like this part of the video. But it's just important to understand that Resnack, once again, is trying to get somebody married to Daenerys that is more Marinese, more in their culture. And when we see that there's maybe an assassination attempt on Daenerys' life in this book, a little interesting. So I want you guys to keep that in the back of your mind, as we continue. Resnack has this once again to say about the great nobles. Magnificence, murmured Resnack Mo Resnack. We cannot know that these great nobles mean to join your enemies. More like they are simply making for their estates in the hills. They will not mind us keeping their gold safe then. There is nothing to buy in the hills. They are afraid for their children, Resnack said. Again, Resnack takes the side of the nobles, once again going against Daenerys and the counsel that she's being given. And so maybe Resnack is just somebody that's a bit more compassionate and maybe sees, the other sides of the coin, maybe a bit more empathetic, but it's hard to overlook when I can go through this whole list and keep telling you guys more times that Resnack goes directly against Daenerys in her beliefs. So even when we get to, Hisdar and Daenerys' wedding and kind of the customs building up to that, Resnack is one of the people that makes a big deal out of the wedding customs of Meereen. So Daenerys says this about one of the customs done before weddings. I have no wish to give offense, but I will not present myself naked to Hisdar's mother and sisters. But, said Resnack Mo Resnack, blinking, but you must, your worship. Before a marriage, it is tradition for the woman of the man's house to examine the bride's womb and her female parts to ascertain that they are well formed and fertile. Finished Galaza Galar. So once again, Resnack is in opposition to Daenerys and even second-guessing her on a lot of these things. Now, we maybe know why that is the case, but still, Resnack constantly is taking the side of others besides Daenerys. And so that kind of gets us to the very end of A Dance with Dragons. So Dance with Dragons, we're going to talk about what Resnack has been doing after Daenerys has left and how that also seems very suspicious and is very suspect when you put it under the microscope through Barristan's POVs. So this begins the Queen's Guard chapter of A Dance with Dragons. You are the Queen's man, said Resnack Mo Resnack. The king desires his own men about him when he holds court. I am the Queen's man still, today, tomorrow, always, until my last breath or hers. Barristan Selmy refused to believe that Daenerys Targaryen was dead. And he continues saying that perhaps that was why he was being put aside. One by one, Hisdar removes us all. And that's the interesting part. Everybody within this council that Daenerys had that was close to her, that everybody was loyal to her, but maybe not so much Hisdar, is gone. All except one, Resnack. And it makes it very suspicious. Because, okay, if Resnack was super loyal to Daenerys and all these things, why hasn't he been replaced? Everybody else has. It's because Resnack is very sympathetic towards the nobles, and I would almost go as far as suggesting the two maybe be plotting, or that Resnack and the Green Grace are using Hisdar to gain power and influence. That'll continue us on as we get to even more of Barristan's distrust and some of the things coming out about him in the very end of A Dance with Dragons. Barristan once again thinks this. He kept his sword and dagger. This could still be some trap. He had little trust in Hisdar, unless in Resnack Mo Resnack, the Perfumed Seneschal could be part of this, trying to lure him into a secret meeting so he could sweep him up and Skahaz both and charge them with conspiring against the king. It's going to get even worse when Barristan actually meets with Skahaz, because Skahaz has this to say about him. Volantis, Selmy's sword hand tingled. We made a peace with Yunkai, not with Volantis. You are certain? Certain, the wise masters know. So do their friends, the Harpy, Resnack, Hisdar. This king will open the city gates to Volantes when they arrive. All those Dany freed will be enslaved again. Even some who were never slaves will be fitted for chains. You may end your days in a fighting pit, old man. Kraz will eat your heart. And that is, again, more of this leaning into it. Even Skahaz is putting blame on Resnack now. I will say, I wouldn't take this as fact. Reznak and Skahaz are pretty bitter enemies in my opinion. They have completely different beliefs. They're always on one spectrum or the other when talking with Daenerys. One, is really for the slave people, the lower class, putting a lot of violence and punishment to the nobles, where the other one is kind of the opposite. So I would, take this with a grain of salt, but it is interesting that, again, Skahaz puts Hizdar, Reznak, and the Harpy all together into one. But that gets me to my last mention that I want to talk about with Reznak before we kind of sum it up and kind of move on to the next one. So this occurs when Barristan is actually taking Hizdar, captive and whatnot, and actually doing his coup. But this comes out. Barristan asks King Hizdar, "Was the poison your work, magnificence?" King Hizdar backed away a step. "The locust, that was the Dornishman, Quentin, the so-called prince. Ask Reznak if you doubt me. Have you proof of that?" Has Reznak. Right away, it's interesting that Hizdar is seen relying on Reznak quite a lot. Even when you think about Daenerys and you think about even Hizdar earlier on, Reznak always seems to be whispering in their ears, very similar to like Littlefinger with Ned in Book 1, or even Varys to a degree. And so that's where we're kind of sitting at, right? We know that Reznak, it seems like, has been taken prisoner, although it is a little weird because Reznak gets this message about Quentin releasing the dragons, basically to Hizdar when he should be imprisoned already. Little interesting that that doesn't occur. So let's kind of sum it up. So Reznak, for the most part, is a character that is completely against Daenerys on almost every single policy, every single discussion that they have. He is somebody that is distrustful. Multiple people distrust him. He is in a position of power. He seems to be gaining off of the issues going on with Daenerys, Barris, and all these other characters. He has somehow elevated his position. It's very interesting to me, and I can't deny that it does fit a lot of things really well. But is it just too obvious given that Daenerys thinks about, him specifically being this character multiple times, or is it somebody else? There are two others that are basically linked together that possibly could fit this description. So moving on to our second suspect. Illyrio Mopatis, in my opinion, is somebody that really fits this description well of this Perfumed Seneschal. And given that he is the first character that I think really fits it in the entire series, because he has a very distinct connection to Daenerys, right? He was harboring them for, the beginning of the story. And so when we look at his description right off the bat, right, we get a description from Daenerys that she could smell the stench of Illyrio's pallid flesh through his heavy perfumes. Once again, he's this perfumed type character. But also he is somebody that you could say is a steward in charge of a lord's estate, right? He has his own estate, all of those things that, would fit that definition. And so he fits that pretty well. So right away, he fits the description. We can get that right out of the way, just like how Reznak does. He's very much a suspect based upon that. But you also think about the way he is described by individuals, right? Daenerys, for instance, at multiple points at the very beginning of the story, she is somebody that does not trust Illyrio. And that is something that I want to bring up to you guys because we really need to understand at points where our characters don't believe this character because he is somebody that would betray somebody like Daenerys. So Daenerys says this about Illyrio in Book 1. Dany said nothing. Magister Illyrio is a dealer in spices, gemstones, dragonbone, and other less savory things. He had friends in all of the 9 free cities, it was said, and even beyond Vase Dothrak and the fabled lands beside the Jade Sea. It was also said that he never had a friend he wouldn't cheerfully sell for the right price. Does that sound like a trustworthy individual? Does that sound like somebody that you should be thinking very highly of? These are all things Daenerys picks up in just Book 1, even at how young of an age that she is. But at the same time, you think about those things, when we get later on in the series, Daenerys actually thinks of him as a friend, as an ally, as somebody that she can trust. And that's something that's very much put to the test multiple times throughout the story. Another mention of Illyrio, Daenerys has this again about Illyrio to say in Book 1. Dany had no agents, no way of knowing what anyone was doing or thinking across the narrow sea, but she mistrusted Illyrio's sweet words as she mistrusted everything with Illyrio. Again, sweet words, kind of like his sweet perfumes. He's somebody that you can't trust. All of this is built into our mind within the very first couple chapters with Daenerys of the entire series. And so when we're going back to the Quaithe prophecy, and it's talking about someone you should be warned about, and fitting this exact description that Illyrio has brings up a lot of warning flags for me. But I also want to discuss two mentions that we get in both the Clash of Kings and A Storm of Swords, where Jorah is trying to remind Daenerys that Illyrio is not a friend to you. He is not somebody that you can trust. He's somebody that will sell you out, because she forgets those things. Because Illyrio gives her the eggs, and in her relationship with Drogo, she actually did, love Drogo by the end of it. So maybe she doesn't think about it as badly as, it actually is, that she was sold there. And you think about all these things that Illyrio's done, sending Strong Belwys and Barristan to her. She kind of has forgotten who Illyrio really is. And so Jorah tries to remind her here in both the Clash of Kings and A Storm of Swords, which I'm going to bring up for you guys as well. So this is basically the exchange Jorah and Daenerys have in Clash of Kings. House Targaryen has friends in the free cities, she reminded him. Truer friends in Exaro or the Pureborn. If you mean Illyrio Mopatis, I wonder, for sufficient gold, Illyrio would sell you as quickly as he would a slave. My brother and I were guests in Illyrio's manse for half a year. If he meant to sell us, he could have done it then. He did sell you, Ser Jorah said, to Khal Drogo. Dany flushed. He had the truth of it, but she did not like the sharpness with which he put it. Illyrio protected us from the usurper's knives, and he believed in my brother's cause. Illyrio believes no cause but Illyrio. Gluttons are greedy men as a rule, and magisters are devious. Illyrio Mopatis is both. What do you truly know of him? I know that he gave me my eggs. He snorted. If he'd known that they were like to hatch, he would have sat on them himself. That made her to smile despite herself. Oh, I have no doubt of that, sir. I know Illyrio better than you think. I was a child when I left his manse in Pentos to wed my sun and stars, but I was neither deaf nor blind, and I am no child now. Even if Illyrio is the friend you think him, the knight said stubbornly, he is not powerful enough to enthrone you by himself, no more than he could your brother. So again, a lot of words there, but basically the point of it is just show Daenerys, yeah, this guy is not somebody you can trust. Why do you talk so positively about him? That's something Daenerys basically forgets by A Dance with Dragons. And Jorah, part of it is his jealousy because he doesn't like other men being involved with Daenerys because he has this weird pedophilic relationship kind of with her. And so what he's saying is truthful, but maybe not coming from the right, place. But still, it points to that idea Daenerys cannot trust Illyrio. So again, Jorah says this to Daenerys about Illyrio and his trustworthiness. These are Illyrio's ships, Illyrio's captains, Illyrio's sailors, and Strong Belwys and Ariston are his men as well, not yours. Magister Illyrio has protected me in the past. Strong Belwys says that he wept when he heard my brother was dead. Yes, said Mormont, but did he weep for Viserys or for the plans he had made with him? His plans need not change. Magister Illyrio is a friend to House Targaryen and wealthy. He was not born wealthy in this world as I have seen it. No man grows rich by kindness. The warlocks and the second treason would be for gold. What does Illyrio Mopatis love more than gold? His skin. Across the cabin, Drogon stirred restlessly, steam rising from his snoot. Mirri Maz Duur betrayed me. I burned her for it. Mirri Maz Duur was in your power, and Pentos you shall be in Illyrio's power. It is not the same. I know the Magister as well as you. He's a devious man and clever. So again, right away, it's Jorah just kind of reminding her that, oh yeah, this is basically, again, right off the bat, just reminding us that Illyrio is somebody that would be willing to sell out Daenerys, all those things. I'm just trying to really hammer that in for you guys so you understand that. But it's also this idea that, yeah, Illyrio was using you guys as little playthings, right? He's trying to, cause a war, trying to get benefits for himself. That's all going to lead into A Dance with Dragons when we hear kind of Tyrion's thoughts on him, right? Specifically in A Dance with Dragons, we get Tyrion basically asking what are his intentions for having Daenerys on the throne? What is he trying to gain? And this is the response we see from Illyrio. Tyrion then says, are you quite certain that Daenerys will make good her brother's promises? And Illyrio, funny enough, says this. She will or she will not. Illyrio bit the egg in half. I told you, my little friend, not all that a man does is done for gain. Believe as you wish, but even fat old fools like me have friends and debts of affection to repay. So right there, right? It seems like there is something there that Illyrio is doing it more. Not just for gold, that maybe that's part of it, and gain and all those things. That's definitely part of it, but it's that he has this personal connection to whatever he's doing with Daenerys, right? And when you think about it, and we go through this plot of the Young Griff, the plan is that Young Griff is going to marry Daenerys. Why does Illyrio have such a connection with young Griff and this Daenerys stuff? Why is it so personal for him? And even later on, when we get to, Illyrio talking about not only the Golden Company, but his second wife, why does he seem to have even more interest within it? For instance, Tyrion, asks Illyrio, how did you convince the Golden Company to take up the cause of our sweet king when they have spent so much of their history fighting against the Targaryens? And Illyrio just brushes this away, saying, black or red, a dragon is still a dragon. And then follows up saying, Daenerys will give the exiles what bitter steel and the Blackfires never could. She will take them home. So right away, that doesn't seem to add up. The Golden Company is built on this premise of the Blackfires. All of a sudden, now they're just going to go to Daenerys' side? It doesn't really seem to add up as much. And Tyrion even kind of thinks about that. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. And when you have Illyrio making statements, like he does, this is personal. There's some personal part of this in here. And then when we get to, for instance, we just got, in that quote that I just brought up with you guys, he talks about the last male claimant, Meleys, right? He doesn't say anything about the female side. And that's where we get it even more interesting. He talks about Sarah, the other girl that he was basically in love with. Now, this is interesting because Illyrio's story is that he found her in a Lysine pillow house and brought her home to warm my bed. But in the end, I wed her. Me, whose first wife had been a cousin of the Prince of Pentos. The palace gates were closed to me thereafter, but I did not care. The price was small enough for Sarah. But he even talks about how she died, and that it basically come from a plague, a sickness. But he keeps her hands in his bedchambers, and in her bedchamber, because her hands were so soft. Interesting. Given that George's main thing he writes about is the heart at conflict, it seems interesting here that his second wife was so important to him that he made sure that he kept her hands. That's something that deeply seems to depress him and actually gets some actual genuine emotion. And so what if this, woman named Sarah was a Blackfire, or had some Blackfire blood in her? And when we get to see, Tyrion and Illyrio departing, seems to be very sentimental towards this character of young Griff. He says things like this: Griff is different. He has a son he dotes on. Young Griff the boy is called. There never was a nobler lad. Really, Illyrio was saying here that young Griff is very important. He's very valuable. He's a great, person. A lot of high praise from Illyrio. Why is this young child getting so much respect and love from Illyrio? And even in A Dance with Dragons, Illyrio asks, how fares our lad? He asks about the well-being. That's something he never does with Daenerys or Viserys. That is quite interesting. Why is that occurring? Illyrio has some personal tie here. And whether you believe it's because, young Griff is Illyrio's son, whether you believe that maybe that line is from Varys, has a personal line. It all connects. Illyrio saying he has more investment in this than just, personal gain. And yet the first thing we see after that is young Griff. And even when you think about how Illyrio departs, he says this: good fortune, Illyrio called after them. Tell the boy I am sorry that I'll not be with him for his wedding. I will rejoin you in Westeros, that I swear, by my sweet Sarah's hands. Interesting. He swears upon this wife that he seemed to love so much, and he almost seems sad. He almost seems genuine for a small second, like when he talked about his wife earlier on with Tyrion. And so everything seems to be leading to this idea that Illyrio is related to young Griff or has personal investment with young Griff. Now, why would that be very interesting and key to why he would betray Daenerys and why Daenerys shouldn't trust him? Because they're parading him as Aegon Targaryen. And maybe he even is Aegon Targaryen, but either way, Illyrio is someone that cares more about young Griff than he ever did Daenerys or Viserys. And it's pretty easily shown here in A Dance with Dragons with what I've already brought up, right? And so when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. And even when you get to another mention, Dany thinks about how she owes Illyrio later on in the book and all these things because of what has been sent to her. And she doesn't allow basically the tattered prince to have claim over Westeros. That's basically his price. It's very interesting that Illyrio is somebody that Daenerys still views as a friend. And we've talked about that. Even though multiple times she's been warned, she still views him and trusts him to a degree. And when you have Illyrio, who's playing his own game. He's trying to get the Blackfires on the throne with young Griff. If you subscribe to that theory, you kind of have to if you're going to go with kind of what I'm kind of proposing here. There is an alternative way you could have, Illyrio be this character, but it all kind of fits into place very nicely. And so I do personally believe that Illyrio is the Perfumed Seneschal. I know we have one more candidate to talk about, but I do think it is him. I think everything points to it. And the other part of this that I think is more important is Illyrio is somebody that has a connection with Daenerys already. It's something that's been foreshadowed in the very beginning of the book with the multiple mentions that I brought up about how Daenerys views him and how that's kind of eroded as time has gone on. I think it would be a great tie-in if we do get to see that Daenerys is basically betrayed by Illyrio, and that comes full circle. Because as Reznak does fit all the criteria, and it makes sense if it is that character, it doesn't have the same betrayal. It doesn't have the same emotional value because Daenerys already expects that Reznak is the person that's going to basically betray her to not trust. She already thinks that. And so I think it makes the most amount of sense for it to be Illyrio. But there is one last candidate. The last candidate I have is Varys. I don't have as much in terms of like mentions and quotes like I did with the others because to me, Varys is a difficult one because yes, Varys does fit the description, right? We get a mention by Catelyn when she first meets Varys that he is somebody that's very perfumed. I'll probably have that up on screen. I'm not going to read it, but he is perfumed. He is somebody that I do believe would like fit this idea of an agent in charge of like a lord's estate in feudal times. Like I think he would somewhat fit that. I don't think it's as perfectly as the other two, but I think he still would fit that. He's a character that's untrusting. Again, we can just go throughout the entire story multiple times. Varys is manipulating people. But I think the most important part to discuss if Varys is the person is that he would eventually have to get into Daenerys's graces for then him to betray her or to do those things. And Varys, I don't think is going to come into contact with Daenerys for still quite a long time. And so for Varys to be the person that Quaithe is mentioning when I don't even think Varys will even meet Daenerys for another book. And we even have the declaration, right? Let's just go to, the very end of the book with Varys. When Varys declares this, doubt, division, and mistrust will eat at the very ground beneath your boy king. Whistle Aegon raises his banner above Storm's End, and lords of the realm gather round him. Aegon, for a moment, he did not understand. Then he remembered a babe swaddled in a crimson cloak, the cloth stained with his blood and brains. Dead. He's dead. No, the eunuch's voice seemed deeper. He is here. Aegon has been shaped for rule since before he could walk. He has been trained in arms as befits a knight to be, but that was not the end of his education. He reads and writes. He speaks several tongues. He has studied history and law and poetry. A Septa has instructed him in the mysteries of the faith since he was old enough to understand them. He has lived with fisherfolk, worked with his hands, swum in rivers and mended nets, and learned to wash his own clothes at need. He can fish and cook and bind up a wound. He knows what it's like to be hungry, to be hunted, to be afraid. Tommen has been taught that kingship is his right. Aegon knows that kingship is his duty, that a king must put his people first and live and rule for them. So there you go. Right off the bat, it's basically saying that Varys is a Aegon supporter, not a Daenerys supporter. He says nothing in there about Daenerys and his support for her. He only says things about young Griff. Now, proximity, of course, young Griff is closer, but it's just that Varys has a tie closer to young Griff, and it's much more obvious. Now, with that all being said, I don't think Varys is this character because he doesn't have the tie to Daenerys, and I don't even think Varys will be in contact with Daenerys, physically in quite a bit more of the story. So the only characters that I think really fit that are going to be characters like Reznak and even Illyrio. Some people, I've even said this in the past, have said the Shave Pate or Skahaz, but I just don't think he fits that, description. I think in the past I have not looked at this theory correctly, and I went much more in depth in this one. This video is already, as I'm recording it, 46 minutes, probably with a lot of the dead time cut out. It'll probably be maybe under 40 minutes or around there, but when you think about it, he doesn't really fit. He's somebody that isn't described as being perfumed whatsoever. I do think he is somebody that's still very distrustworthy, and he will be somebody that I could very easily see betraying Barristan, and then by extension Daenerys. But I don't think he's the character that Quaithe was alluding to in this prophecy. So I think you're kind of left with, is it the character that George has obviously put in front of us for Daenerys to think it is, Or is it somebody that I think has much more of a historical tie to Daenerys? It has much more of a significance for the story in Illyrio. I think those are the two main options. I think Varys is also somebody you could throw in there if this theory is talking more on the long part of the series. Possibly that could be it. But let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys on the next one. I hope you guys enjoyed the longer video. I really enjoyed researching this project as well. So yeah, if you enjoyed, subscribe and like. This video did take quite a lot of effort and research to do. And I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.